Welcome. My name is Kelly Riordan. I'm a classical musician turned creative entrepreneur, and this is the best platform for musicians that are looking to shape their career by thinking outside the box.
Leanna, I've been so looking forward to this one. I'm so excited to talk with you today. Thank you for being here. I want to just jump right in at the beginning, as always, with the very, very first time that you actually started playing an instrument or taking lessons. At what age did you start music?
So I'm really, really lucky where my father was a piano player, always was. And so my first experience was just watching him play Yellow Submarine as me and my sister danced around. Yeah. So I was very lucky in that way where I had that upbringing where music was just a part of life. My dad had what we called his bar downstairs, really was just a man cave. But it was always right before bedtime where dad was like, come down, just listen to one more song, just one more song.
That's so cute. Oh my
yeah, drove my mom crazy as she's trying to get us to bed.
Was he a professional musician, or was this a hobby that he had that he just absolutely loved to play?
Yep, it was just a hobby. His mother started him when he was young, and my dad was a total mama's boy, where she'd hand him a piece of sheet music and just say just do a really good job, and he was like, I'm gonna do so good.
That's so cute. Oh my
goodness.
So
and that definitely passed to me.
Did you want to start lessons on your own then, or was it kind of dad that drove that bus?
No. Dad was really let them watch and then let's see where it takes them. But the second that me and my older sister started showing inklings, suddenly there was tape on the piano keys with the letters written in, and yeah. And he couldn't teach us though. He definitely, my dad, did not have the patience to be a teacher, so they did get someone to come in when I was probably, I want to say 6 around the time. Okay. And yeah, we had lessons until we were in, end of elementary school, middle school, and from there it was a solo journey. Where do you want to take this? And my parents were really great about just supporting whatever journey me and my sister took.
That's awesome. Now, obviously, you're working in music education, so you kind of come full circle pretty quickly. At what point did you know that you wanted to study music, or that you wanted to be an educator in your?
So I'm really lucky. Yeah, I'm really lucky where I kind of was stuck between, okay, do I want to perform? Do I want to teach? I really wasn't sure, and I had kind of applied to 2 schools. That one said, oh, we want to take you for education for college, and another that said, no, we'll only take you for performance. And suddenly it's oh, well, here's the choice. So how do I make this? And lucky for me, I ended up spending 4 summers in the Dominican Republic, just doing some work with the school down there, and I ended up becoming the main teacher for this amazing school, where I would help run kind of a camp for the kids that were down there. And from the second that I had my first summer, I was like, oh, so this is what I want to do. Wow. It was an incredible experience. I will never forget. We were building a playground in the back, and I was focusing so hard on this slide that we were trying to make, and it was one of those swirly slides, so it was complicated. This was a tough slide. So I was late for one of my lessons, and I realized it and ran in, and all the kids had gotten sad because it was my last day, so they thought that I had already left and that we didn't get to have our last music class, and to have that feeling of, oh, you want this, you want to do music. It was really incredible.
That's so cute. What brought you down to the DR originally? Was it a program that you were going through? Was it something with your school?
It was a program through a church that I was at. It's called Kids Alive, a great mission program that really focuses, instead of you going down and being some heroic la la la. No, you're going down to support the people who are living there and who have their community there. And your job is to support and offer whatever help you can, but not to come down and be heroic. Kind of thing.
Got it. So some really good hands-on education experience for you too, working with the kids and figuring out what you wanted to do. That's awesome.
And figuring out Spanish at the same time. That was not, I'm passable with Spanish, but these kids were just the most amazing, where they were so forgiving. I can't imagine some of the awful Spanish that I would ask them to do. But then the second that we started making music, it's like, oh, everybody does this. Everybody speaks this kind of language. So total language barrier just went well, right when we started making music.
That is so cool. And you said you did that for several summers. Was that something you were doing like in high school and kind of figuring out your path at that point? Like now I'm teaching these classes, I'm enjoying it. So education is a sure thing.
Exactly. It started my junior year of high school and then went into college.
Very cool. And tell me a little bit about undergrad. How did you pick a program? It sounds like, I mean, you kind of had to decide between your degree programs too at the same time you were picking a school.
Yes. Well, that was actually another easy decision. It seems like my life just kind of like has led me into some very easy decisions. But I grew up in Connecticut, and the one place that I was looking at was extremely expensive. If my family was going to make it work, I'd have to be a commuter, which would have been very difficult. And that was for performance. And then my mom was just like, well, let's just check out WestCon, Western Connecticut State University. It'll be much more affordable. You can stay on campus. Let's just look at their music program. And this just happened to be the year that they opened up this brand new, beautiful, like state-of-the-art performance academy building. Oh, it was incredible. I'm talking like the second that I took a tour, and again, I was like the first group of students that was in the auditorium that was specifically crafted to have the best sounds, the pianos flown in from Germany, the like, oh my, even just the practice rooms you walked in, you're like,
my goodness.
It was just another easy decision. And I happened to have been in a choir where this it was one of the state choirs that you had to audition into if you got in. Fantastic. And Dr. Corey Ganshaw was the conductor. And she was this incredible conductor, had this photographic memory where the second she saw you, she would know you for the rest of your life. And as I'm auditioning to get into WestCon, who is there but Dr. Corey Ganshaw? And she goes, I did a choir with you. And I'm like, I will learn everything from you. She is one of the leads in the music education world on actually taking, something that could be a boring lecture and making it into an experience. That is Dr. Corey Ganshaw. Amazing educator.
Awesome. Well, and it sounds like, obviously we're talking about you being a music educator. From our previous conversations, it really feels like that's a big part of your education and pedagogy, is that it's not going to be just information disbursement, but let's make this involved. It's more of a Socratic situation where your students are involved in the class and involved in the planning and trying to do the things that interest them, which, I mean, we'll get into your business here in a second too and how that all came about. But I feel like that's got to be a really big part of what you learned there, was this involvement from your students.
Yes. Dr. Corey Ganshaw will always be my top. Oh, she was just incredible. Really, really. I couldn't have found a better learning experience, and it gave me time to perform as well in so many amazing operas. The opera teacher managed to get me a place to sing in the Met with with members of The Who, Pete Townsend, for their opera of Tommy. And I was just, little, but yeah, like such an amazing opportunity for just a state school, like really incredible.
So after undergrad, what came next for you?
It was actually a little bit during undergrad where I got this placement student teaching. And at first I was very upset about it because it was elementary. And everyone had told me like, oh, Leanna, you're going to do elementary. You're bubbly and that's what you're going to do. And I remember being very actually upset about that because I felt like I was being typecast, and I was told that, oh, well, you could only do this. And it got me to just like be kind of like, well, I can do a lot of things. I could conduct a band. I can conduct a full orchestra and choir. Like, and that I feel like influenced so much of my, career, as already it was being talked down to. Already it was treating elementary school like it was just something that you did, but not something that you did because you were passionate about
Right.
And so when I got my placement student teaching, it was a K through 8. And they were like, oh, good, then you'll have both placements. You don't need to go to a high school. And I remember being like, oh, I want this experience to teach high school. And then I started to fall in love with elementary and with middle. And I had to get the
maybe
voices.
It wasn't a negative thing. It was, with your best interest at heart.
Well, it wasn't the fact that it was a negative. Because either way, now in my mind, I look back at it and I'm like, elementary was never a negative. But how people talked about it, that was the negative. This mentality of, oh, well, that's the easy way out. Oh, people who don't really do this well can do elementary. And I had to now totally break that down and spend my first 5 years of my career breaking it down and being like, why are we assuming this?
Yeah.
Why aren't we instead treating elementary school as the building blocks for the rest of your musical journey? And instead, like even at the conference we were at for the NAMM conference where we met, Kelly, like it was, I'm looking around. There's no elementary music stands. There's not that many professional developments for elementary music educators. I was like, interesting. Why? So, but that was my placement.
I had a conversation recently with someone about NAMM and educators at NAMM because they do amazing, believe in music stuff, and they'll name music education communities, and they do a lot with education. But when we go to the show, you're right. There are a lot of fantastic. Yes, and this is common for a lot of conferences. This is not a NAMM specific problem, but you go and there's a ton of education sessions, and a lot of them are either like very music business and hyper focused on that, or they are just generalized music education for everyone, and they end up tending to focus a lot on middle school and high school ensembles or like new changes in music. For example, I sat on one last year at NAMM that was leveraging like beat making software for elementary students and middle school students to get them more interested in staying in music classes and not just regular band, orchestra, choir, western music kind of thing, which is super cool. But the diversity isn't there. Like a lot of private educators aren't going to these things, or they look at big conferences if they're not going to be like TMEA or the statewide Music Educators Association. A lot of teachers aren't going to these things. There isn't enough opportunity there, and it's actually really frustrating to see how much education exists and not enough people are there to actually absorb it and learn.
Yes. I agree 100%. And then you see like the little sections that did involve elementary music, and you saw how impactful that was. I was able to watch one with Shauna Longo, who later on I was like, oh, I have to interview you. Can we schedule a time? This just happened. And she was able to bring technology into kindergarten, preschool, and first grade. And the way she did, I was like, this is what is going to give our students the experiences so that in middle school, in high school, they want to continue into the music making.
Absolutely. And sometimes we focus so much, and I'm sure you see this with your own students, we focus so much on what we were taught growing up. Like in my elementary music education, I learned Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. Not that we, of course, don't want to focus on those things. We always need to learn Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. But also, not all of our students care. It's not culturally relevant for all of our students. We don't have to shove it down their throats. If it's not exciting, interesting for them, like we can touch on those things as a basis for how a lot of our music came to be. That's great. But what they really want to learn about is what they're listening to on the radio and the Disney music that they enjoy. And that's what they want to hear. So it's a challenge. I'm sure you experience this a lot in your classroom, especially the last couple of years.
Oh, yes. No, 100%. It's gotten to the point where you need to be able to listen as an educator and not make the assumptions that just because you learned music a certain way, that that's the way it should be done, to instead be open to involving your students in this process, seeing what they like, seeing what they gravitate towards, and still making sure that you're teaching high quality fundamentals, but through a language that they can understand. Either way, I agree, I think it's important that we're teaching Bach and Beethoven, but if you're going to teach it to them while they're sitting in a chair, you've lost them already. It needs to be an experience that they can actually be involved in, and that one that you can track and see, well, how are they actually being affected, and do they care? And if not, well, do I want to figure out how to make them care, or should I go towards what they're already like?
There's a great session at NAM that I think John Lenchik did that was about TikTok in the classroom and how you could take like TikTok type. Did you go to the session? I don't know if you were there, but
no, okay. I missed that. I don't know how cool. I missed that.
I think this one's recorded. You can totally go back and watch it. But he was talking about how to use like short form video as assignments for your students in the classroom. Like kids are already consuming music this way. They already want to be doing these things. Why don't we just make it safer? Instead of like actually having them be on TikTok or be posting on TikTok, what if we could, have them create little short form videos in the classroom or experiment with things on their own, and then we can do it in the safe, like Google Drive and Google Classroom, so they're not distributing everything all over the internet. But they can try those things and kind of explore that creative side. And it made me think of a creator, as we're talking about this, that I'm sure you've seen him too. He'll dress up in, I don't know, like he's got this, it sounds like a blue jacket, very circa American Revolution type garb. He's got a wig that he wears, and he'll like make these little funny videos on TikTok about, if Beethoven dropped today, and like people sitting in the car, and he's like got the wig on and the jacket, and it'll be
okay, wait, yes, I do know what you're talking about.
He's dancing. Yeah. Okay, these are so funny, and I wish I could remember his handle. He's so entertaining. But like that's the stuff that our kids think is funny. Like they're super into that, and that self-expression and reacting to the music physically. I mean, obviously we're going to get into the fact that that's a huge part of what you do in your education here in a second, but that's what kids are actually interested in. How can we tie it back and make it culturally relevant, so we're not just again talking about old dead white guys that have been gone for hundreds of years, that again it's not.
And the second that you say that they're dead, the kids just check out. They're like, oh, why do I want to learn about this person? And it's like, well, that's a really good point. Maybe we should make sure that this is appropriate, not even appropriate, but relevant to what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, and it's different when, for example, when I work with high school students on repertoire, we'll talk about Mozart. I got a kid playing the Mozart quintet right now, clarinet quintet. And as we're talking about the piece and the composer, it's a light-hearted piece. It's cute. It's fun. And we have to talk about how this reflects personality and like what was his personality? Who was he as a human? What do we know about him and how he presented himself every day? Not just when was he born? When did he die? What pieces did he write in between? But the expression there, because that's really what we're trying to aim for.
100%.
Okay, so in your education, movement is a huge part of what you do with your students. Tell me more about that. Has it always been something since your student teaching, or is that something that you kind of developed yourself over time?
For me, it definitely started in student teaching, but really it got to its height when I accepted my first position as the music educator on my own in Providence, Rhode Island, an amazing, amazing school. I absolutely love my time there. But my students were inner city students who definitely, they're kindergartners. They had energy. And how can I use that energy in an effective way? And I had what every first year teacher has, which was wanting to pull your hair out. These students won't sit. They don't care what I'm doing. Those feelings that every first year teacher gets, that it's just the feeling of, oh my gosh, how can I take this crazy group of students and make this into effective music making? And I struggled like everybody does. And that struggling obviously continued, but changed and became more productive when I realized, look at how I'm teaching. I am teaching my students as they sit. I am teaching my students as I stand in front of them. I am teaching my students as I click on a presentation and lose them immediately. And that's not to say that presentations, like I'm a Google Slides queen. I will use it for every single lesson, but it's really now the difference of it's my guiding tool to get my students to understand what their part to play in my lessons are. And that's continued through everything. Like even now I'm doing private lessons, I'm using Google Slides. I was doing virtual lessons, I use Google Slides, but as a way to get my students up and moving and enjoying music. And for me, that started with scarf dancing. And scarf dancing, actually, it's so funny that we're talking about, Mozart, Beethoven. That's how I started. It's definitely evolved and changed in a lot of ways, but that was the first thing that I just am sitting in my classroom one day and I'm like, all right, these kids need to move, but I don't want to just put on a YouTube video. They will never be able to have the same experience, and I believe this is for everyone, with the videos that are on YouTube. Not that those aren't great tools, because they can be, but the teacher in the room is the one that the students have a connection with. If you're developing that personal connection, then these movement breaks, if we're going to be effective, have to come from the teacher themselves, and from a teacher who can also be present to say, all right, this student, he's not on task. Let me walk a little more towards him. Or, oh, you know what, that one's kind of talking. Let me just make some eye contact, kind of thing, where a YouTube video can't do that. So I spent some time trying to add those movement breaks in, finding that they were actually causing this whirling vortex of chaos to go farther and farther down. And when I took some time to make my own choreography with just some Beethoven, some Mozart, some Vivaldi, and not only did my students then start to go, who is this? I was like, oh, and suddenly it opened up this gateway where they were dancing to all of these songs that I was moving them with. And by the time that they became in 3rd grade and 4th grade, I'd play it. I'd say, well, take a listen. Do you know this? Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, miss, we do this. Yes, we do. Do you want to know who this is? They had that connection already to be like, what? And then, you still have to teach it in a way that's accessible to them. Like you said, it's those fun facts that are going to get the kids. Well, did we know that this person actually, his dad wanted him to be a banker because he didn't want competition? Like things like that. And suddenly you've taken something that could be so boring and made it interesting. History is not boring. Either way, history, if it's taught well, is just a story. And students grasp these stories and they love these stories if they're told like that. Once upon a time, there was a musician. All of a sudden, you just took something and first you gave them an experience. Then you gave them a story to connect to that experience. And that's what really started off my entire business. And everything since then was this feeling of, all right, let me give multiple experiences to get my students moving, to get them interacting with what I want to teach, and to get their feedback and to hear what they want to do, and to get them improvising during the scarf dances. And then later on, if they have these connections, which I'm very happy to say they did, then I'll teach about who this person was. And what I found is that each year I'd be like, all right, scarf dances got to be done by the time they get, 5th grade, we got to be done. But with the students that I started scarf dancing with in kindergarten, then by the time they were in 5th grade, I was like, all right, guys, so we're probably going to put scarf dancing to the side. And they're like, no! And there was this uproar in my class because they had gotten so used to it. I had made a routine around it that my students had come to expect and to look forward to. We started every single class. The first 5 to 10 minutes was a scarf dance. It got them in the right way. It got them in the right headspace. And I found as I went through it, oh, well, this isn't just to teach classical music. This isn't just to teach improvisation. This is to teach pitch and texture and form and dynamics and articulation. And all of a sudden I was like, all right, guys, if I was to ask you to move in a way that's pianissimo, how would you move? And they didn't just have these abstract concepts of, well, what are dynamics? What's articulation? That's just a term until you put it in their body. And then suddenly it's not a term, it's an experience that they're able to connect with. And that just made vocabulary, it made rhythm challenges, all of these things that I was struggling with. And each time I found I was struggling with something, I was, oh, let me put it in a scarf dance. And then there was that struggle that someone was like, oh, well, I'm glad we figured that out, kind of thing.
Well, what's so cool about this too is a lot of, we're talking about classical Western art music, jumping back to Bach and to Beethoven, these were written a lot of the time it was party music. Like it was the popular repertoire at that time. It was written to be dance music. So when we try to teach something that was meant to be a dance by just sitting still and talking about it, of course that's not interesting. Like we're not applying it in the way that it was meant to be applied. So by putting movement to it, it's so helpful. And I'm sure you did this in your private lessons too, but you know, let's say we're going to play a minuet. Let's talk about that. Like, let's dance around the room a little bit and feel how that feels when we're emphasizing the one just a little bit more, so that they've got context for it. And of course, it impacts their playing in the future, and there's more, retention there. But when there's actual context for the music, that's why they're coming and asking about Disney music. There's context. They saw the movie, right? Like they watched it and they understood the story behind it, and that's why they're attached to it. Not just because it's good, catchy music and it's new. It's what they were hearing and they understood. So they actually understand it and apply it. This makes total sense. It's awesome. It's awesome.
And I love what you just said. It's also like, well, they already had a connection to it from the movie, but also from the story. Anything that's told to a child through a story suddenly becomes, I add stories to every single one of my lessons that I can, and obviously it's not just reading it, but it's again, then taking that book and it's making that book into an experience. Oh my goodness, the Mortimer, How to Speak Moo, Sneezy the Snowman, all of these things that come with their own rhythms, come with a song that's able to bring in solfege, rhythm, all of these wonderful things come with, interactive engagement in dynamics and articulation. And again, you're taking it, and instead of teaching it to a group of elementary students in a way that's just you talking, you're telling a story. You're making it an experience. And it's just so funny that you said that, because that's why they love Disney. Disney gives them a story along with the experience. So the second that you do that in your classroom, you've taken something that could be boring and you've made it multiple musical experiences.
Yeah. And that personal connection lasts. I mean, Frozen was so popular for a long time because kids felt connected to Elsa. They liked the characters. There's a story behind it. There's an emotional connection.
Oh, yes.
It's like you're saying, too, that connection exists with the teacher as well, and that it stretches beyond that. When I think back in my own private education, I had my senior year of high school, I started working with my undergraduate professor, Todd Levy, at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, principal clarinet at the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra. And I remember pretty early on in lessons, as I was playing something, he would start to move around the room and start to try to show me the physical movement for things. And so I have these really fond memories of us trying to put some musicality into something that otherwise maybe feels really technical, and moving around the room and trying to like physically express how this might sound or how this might look, and like going home and writing in notes, like making up a story to the piece. And that's what I'm thinking about when I'm playing it. That's what is in my head. It's not just the notes on the page. And you find so much more connection to that, especially when it's something, again, that's like old repertoire that is standard. It's been around for a long time. It's important to have that connection to it. So you've been sharing this with the teachers now. It's going so well. You've been sharing this. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Tell me more about that. How did we get to that point?
Okay, well, actually, we talked a little bit about this at the conference, how you and me had a very similar, oh my goodness, I have a business kind of an aha moment for ourselves, is the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And my school was not as fortunate. We did not have technology to give our students at first. There were no Chromebooks. There were no tablets. A lot of the students were in areas that did not even have Wi-Fi. Like, this was just where we were at. And so I have all of these teachers who are struggling to get a hold of any sort of way, grasping at straws to get their kids learning. And I was like, well, I can't imagine that not only are my students going through these challenging times where everything is up in the air, everything's questionable and scary, and now they don't have music. And I knew how important that was to my students. And I'm so blessed. You and me kind of talked about my fiance, Javon Henry. He's this amazing videographer. He is a photographer. He's an audio engineer. Right now, he's this incredible, I can't say right now, this has been for a while, but he's a voice actor. And our home together in Providence, Rhode Island was full of stuff because he is also a stuffaholic.
At the studio. At the studio set.
Yes. A whole kit and caboodle as I sit here in front of lovely lights and this big old microphone. But I'm looking at my fiance going, my students don't have music. What? And a lot of them, again, they don't have access to it. What can I do? And he's like, how many of them have phones? I was like, you know what? Probably a bunch of them have phones. He goes, how many of them have then access to YouTube? I was like, they might have access to YouTube. We put together 45-minute lessons that were, I will say, given the fact that I am not technically savvy, were very well put together. And they started with a scarf dance, went into a story, musical experiences, assessments, whatever it was. And I was just able to put them on YouTube, to get some of them into Google Classroom for the students that were able to have Google Classroom. But then for the students that didn't, I could just send out, even, I remember at one point it was just through mail. If you have access to YouTube and want to watch and participate in a music lesson, all you have to do is do this. And that became something that was accessible to my students. I took the same Google Slides that I always use to get my students kind of interacting on the smartboard, where they just come up and through basic Google Slides animation, they're like, oh my gosh, I tapped it. Look at this. A bunny came up. I'm like, yeah, that rabbit, you did that. Well done. So I'm able to do that just through recording on Zoom. And it was a great experience. I'm so lucky to have Javon. But now I had parents who were emailing me and sending me text messages. Oh my gosh, Leanna, the whole family was participating in those scarf dances. They always told us about this, but we never saw it. Oh my gosh, we were having so much fun. Or I'm having like families, messaging me saying, our son just walked down the hall singing Beethoven. What are you doing? Like, this is incredible. And I had this aha moment as I'm telling all of the other educators who are like able to do Zoom with their kids, which was great, but it's very difficult to engage a student on a screen. Yeah. It's incredibly difficult. And I see this even now with teachers who are trying to do lessons virtually. It's incredibly difficult to provide your student with the same in-depth education through not being in person. So I had all these educators. Well, what are you doing? How are you doing? I'm getting them moving. And at the end of the day, especially during a time that was scary and uncertain, my students were at home singing and dancing and making music in the same way that they would have if we were together. And they were even able to share it with their families. Like, how wonderful was that? So there was that aha moment as I'm telling all these educators, all of my friends going, this is what you need to do. Here, just try this. And I'm giving them all my stuff. And then there's my fiance sitting next to me and being like, it's great, but
you could just start.
This is a business.
We have the demand. Exactly. We have the supply. Let's put a price on it. Oh my goodness. Well, and what's so cool about this over COVID too is I just remember in our apartment complex, at the time you could see people on their patios, like trying to work out, right? Like everyone's ordering Pelotons, like trying to move their bodies because like we can be outside, but sort of, kind of. And when you're living in a city, it was even more difficult because there's not a lot of outdoor spaces. We got to space out. And like everything was just scary. So it was easier to stay at home, but then we're all sedentary. So even to see students and their families getting to move that way and have family bonding time together, but also to move your body and to get some of the wiggles out and express themselves, but everyone's feeling cooped up at home. That's such a cool gift to be able to provide all of them too, that actual connection and time together, and for parents to participate in the education, not just helping with math homework, but like really be involved in their students' education. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I was very, very lucky. I was very, very lucky to be able to have that aha moment and then transfer that into the Soaring Scarves Academy, where I not only had Javon, who made these absolutely incredible scarf dancing videos with me, but we made movement break videos. We did professional development videos that I have a whole bunch of. And not only that, but then I have my uncle, who I'm just kind of telling him about this, Richard Pelzar. And I'm like, yeah. And then my cousin happened to hear me say, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to make a Wix website. And my cousin, Dad, did you just hear what Leanna said? She's gonna make a wit. And my uncle, who comes over, he's like, Leanna O'Brien, I am a web developer. This is my job. I make people.
I've got this.
I knew it, but I didn't want to be, I didn't want to. Oh yeah, but then he's looking at me. He's like, if you don't let me do this, I will never forgive it. So from there, my uncle very, very much so got me this amazing website, made my logo. I would not have been able to do that without him. Yes. Cool. I was very, very lucky. It looks incredible, something that I could never have done on my own. It definitely took some of his wonderful skill. And from there, there was the Soaring Scarves Academy. I was very, very happy.
That's awesome. So it was Soaring Scarves. So again, this stemmed from your other colleagues just asking for advice and asking you. Obviously, we're all sharing resources. We're all just trying to get through it together in the beginning. Yes. And so just kind of helping from there. But now that we're back in schools, what does this look like? So students have the ability to watch these videos still. Teachers can leverage this. What does that look like in a classroom that's maybe not your own?
Yeah, so no, I cater towards elementary music teachers who believe that movement is music and movement is learning. And they come to the Soaring Scarves Academy to find the resources to bring those in. And my resources include the scarf dances, because that is where we started. And there's two different ways to do that. With the scarf dances, you could either just put me on the screen. Okay. And I will show your students how to do it. I call them my follow along videos. But with all of these follow along videos, I make sure to tell my teachers, hey, you're the one they know. You're the one they love. And it will never mean the same as if it just comes from me, a person on the screen. So then what I have is I have my teacher breakdown videos for the teacher who, and it does take some guts. It does take some guts to learn a dance on your own and then bring it into your classroom. And it definitely does take guts, but I have my teacher breakdown videos and my boot camps. And my boot camps are essentially the professional development that I give to any teacher who joins my curriculum as hey, here's how you're going to bring not only scarf dancing, but effective movement into your classroom that is going to get your kids up and moving, but doing it in a way that they will actually make the connections that you want them to make to what you're trying to teach them. And that's the big thing right there. Is these videos are great. Do not get me wrong. I love my videos. But what I'm very, very proud of is my professional development that gets my teachers to be able to bring this into their classroom and accept it in a exceptional way by giving them the routines so that they're not just throwing scarves and thinking, oh, this will magically solve my problems. No, it won't. If you're having behavioral management issues, most of the times it's because students don't have the chance to move. A moving child is a learning child. And if you take away their ability to move, well, then you're going to have the consequences of, well, that student's wiggling and that student's, picking their nose and that student's whispering and that student's ear. Those are the little problems that every teacher faces. But just through some effective movement, I found that I get rid of at least 75 to 80% of the little stuff. Now, that doesn't mean that, building relationships and things like that, that's going to help with the big stuff doesn't count. Of course it does. But being able to add effective movements, what's going to get rid of those little annoying habits that all our lovely students have because they're kids. So my professional development is what gets these teachers ready to bring these in. And then what I love is I've made my own curriculum. I was very lucky at my school where they didn't tell me that I had to use a curriculum. They said, what would you like to create? And from that moment, I was like, oh, I have so much. So this was a curriculum that did take 5 years to make, but it all comes with providing those experiences, adding stories in the classroom, bringing in multiple cultures to show that we are all the same, and influencing students through their own curiosity and getting them moving instead of a lecture style. So that is what the Soaring Scarves does. Yeah,
That's awesome.
it
Well,
was.
as we're talking about the need for professional development and the need for more information, and it's not that there's not necessarily options out there, but as we have more research, as we have more information, as pedagogy changes and shifts,
Yes.
a lot of the professional development, I know that I've seen, it tends to stay kind of stagnant. It doesn't keep up. It doesn't move as fast as all the other information and the research and the other technology can. And so it's important to have access to those things so that you can maximize the potential. And especially when you're in a classroom where we have some technology, like we have a smart board, but students don't have their individual devices.
Yeah.
Not everything is applicable, right? Some of the professional development that is really tech heavy gets really tech heavy. It's important to have some of these kind of in between. So what are some of the things that you enjoy working with your teachers on, that in the professional development that you guys focus on a lot more often?
Yeah, no, with the kind of like top ones that we've gone over in the last few years have been how to bring cultures into the classroom in a way that is authentic, but that is also acknowledging the fact that you can never be an expert in a culture that is not yours. This is definitely something that I love learning about different cultures, but you have to be very pragmatic, and you have to go about it in a way that you are going to be respectful to the culture that you're trying to represent. And what I found with that is I just basically had the conversation with my teachers of tell them there's no way that as I'm teaching this, I can be an expert. So if you have a question, let's look it up together, and finding those authentic resources and things like that. So that was one. Another one was how to have conversations with administration, which was a big one for, I feel, if you are coming into the profession as a music educator, you have to be ready to have the capability to advocate for our profession as music educators, because it's something that is definitely, we are not subs. We are valuable. We are exactly what a school needs. And yet so often we're the ones to get cut. We're the ones to be used in place of a real teacher. And so that was one that we did. We talked about, fun things like Christmas came around, the holiday season came around. Oh, how to bring Tchaikovsky into the classroom. Not everything's as hard hitting as some of these. How to engage students in effective musical movement. Those are big ones. I feel like a lot of times pitch is something that's so difficult. You'll find the students who are singing do, re, mi, fa, and having just the connection of, in this wonderful book, Mortimer, he has different relatives who have to go up the stairs to tell him to be quiet. So as you're singing it, you're going thumb, 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 thumb. And there's that connection to that movement and the Kerwin hand signs and things like that. I use solfege all the time. But things like that, how to take the stress out of singing is one of the professional developments that we do, because if you didn't have an upbringing like mine where it was just normal to burst into song, well, then someone doing that can be very scary. Things like that.
Very true.
I really started doing professional development because I myself kept on being put, I loved my school. I did. I do. Still, I'm going to be going up to visit them in just a couple of weeks. I'm very excited to do that. But I would be put in professional development that was for a math teacher. That was for a reading specialist. And I'm sitting there like, this has nothing to do with me and has wasted time that I could have spent learning about something to bring into my classroom. So really just being able to provide these, it was just through my Facebook groups and things like that. But now it's also something that I go into schools as a, hey, if you want to hire me to come and do a talk for your music educator, things like that, then I'm hired for that. Or teachers can purchase, the membership, and with their membership that comes with the movement breaks and the scarf dancing. And the entire curriculum is also this professional development archive that comes with the workbooks that they need to actually learn about their own profession, that comes with the lesson plans that they will want to try and test and create their own experiences for their students, because I just wasn't getting that at my school. And I don't blame my administration. They would come to me and say, we couldn't find anything. So I wanted to be that thing that other people could find, kind of thing.
That's awesome. Well, it's hard because I feel like a lot of the quote unquote specials, especially when we talk about the elementary level, you're isolated. You know, it's not a community with the rest of the school. You are kind of on your own. You don't have like your grade level and other teachers that are teaching the same ages, or the teachers just before and just after you. It is very different. And we talk about music education versus art versus PE. These classes are also wildly different, and the approach to them has to be wildly different. But I remember one of my cousins is a music educator, and I remember a story pretty early in Sarah's career that one of the schools that she worked with, they were doing a lot of bucket drumming, I think it was, in her classes. And when her students were in their normal, in their core classes, and there would be behaviors or they were struggling with something, a lot of the teachers would send those kids to the music classroom, to whether it was bucking drumming or other things that they had been doing, to get the movement out. To express themselves, to join in whatever class was existing, or if she had a free hour, to talk through those things, because it was a great way to express things that maybe students were struggling with and they couldn't express otherwise, is to put it into an instrument, or to sing something, or to dance, or to move. And that's always really stuck with me, that when we talk about music, a lot of the students that I work with in my own private lessons are very high anxiety. We're talking about those internal feelings and these very, like you're saying, abstract things, that how do we put words to it? How do we envision this? And we're trying to put it into something more concrete, something we can hear, we can feel, we can play and control. That takes a lot of effort and refinement, and there's so many different ways to do that, that having professional development around that, so that teachers can share these resources and learn from each other, it feels like a no-brainer. Of course there should be these options, but it's not equal treatment. We do struggle with this. It's unfortunate.
Yes. 100%. It's funny though that you say, like, as far as your cousin goes, of course she was the one that the teachers would feel comfortable to send their students to, because we get them. An elementary music teacher will get that student from kindergarten to 4th, 5th grade or above. We're the ones who are able to see them year after year and have that relationship and be that safe place. And then again, this is why I have so many talks about advocacy. We're so essential to a child's happiness in their education, that the fact that the professional development is thought about last, or isn't found easily, or is cut, and things like that. If you're coming into this profession as a music educator now, you have to be willing to stand up for yourself and fight for not only the right to teach, but for your right as a full educator. And that was something that I myself had to come to terms with, as I was told in my school there were 2 music teachers, and one went on maternity leave. And so I was going to take over these classes. And I was like, oh, yeah. And I had the conversation. Okay, well, what would my pay increase look like? And the look that I got was shock and awe.
Yeah. You're just going to take on the extra work of Shirley. Come on.
Of a whole nother teacher that could have had a sub, but instead was going to be me. Okay, well, we're going to pay for a sub. You couldn't find a sub. So, and this was now it had a big development on me, as I had to be the one to advocate for myself. Because like you said, as an elementary teacher, you sometimes end up on an island. And I had to be the one to shout from my island, hey, I matter. My time matters. And my ability to do what nobody else in this school can do matters. And it definitely took a lot of courage and a lot of, I did it, and oh my God, I failed at that conversation, for there to be a lasting change. And luckily my school, after some time and some, other people were brought in to also be like, hey, back me up kind of thing. They made it so that if you sub at all in my school, you are now given an increase to you are given a stipend.
Fantastic. That's
I still say my school. I've been out since almost a year now, but I always feel like it's my school. But they were receptive and understood and made a change, not just for me, but then later on the same thing happened with the art teacher, and they went, oh, at this time I was the specialist curriculum leader, and they were, one of my new teachers was looking at me going, Leanna, they want me to sub. What do? I go, you tell them that you're expecting the same thing that I received. And that's the end of the story kind of thing. And it went very well from there. But it definitely took a lot of courage. And I feel like if you're going to be a music educator in this field, you have to be willing to stand up and say, I will not sacrifice my mental health. I will not sacrifice all of my time. And I expect to be treated like an educator. Doesn't mean that it's not being a team player. I subbed because I had the time in my schedule at the time, but I did expect to be given what any teacher should.
Well, and it's something that is also, for example, we're talking about music on a larger scale, music education on a larger scale. It's not just advocating for your time and your mental health and your energy, but we're advocating for music as a whole and the cultural significance as a whole. This is something that is important to our students too. They need us to be present and well rested. They do care about this. This is a class they look forward to. It's not a bonus or a throwaway. It is essential. And the things that as a music educator we tend to know about our students is shocking. Compare this with I'll maybe just pick on someone a little bit, but when I was in high school and I told my guidance counselor that I was going to go into music, his reaction was, well, I hope you're going to enjoy delivering pizzas, which is wildly inappropriate for a variety of reasons.
My goodness.
And it's very supportive, super, super fantastic guidance happening there. But anyway, when we compare that, like a guidance counselor, for example, is someone that a student only really touches base with when there's a problem. Right? They're not there on a consistent basis. They don't know those students very well. A lot of the teachers, as we're talking about in the classrooms, if they're a core teacher, they're not seeing those students for more than a year, maybe two. It's pretty rare that they're following students consistently. These teachers that are working in specials and as music educators in particular, we're not only with our students for a very long time, but we're also talking about the emotions. As we're talking through music and what it's representing and what it's communicating, we tend to learn a lot of deep things about our kiddos and how they're feeling and how they're processing things, and we can help them work through those emotions in a lot of ways too. And when we talk about music not being essential or maybe being cut from schools, it's scary when we know the support that we're providing from them, or for them rather, on the back end, that maybe other people in administration aren't seeing.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with if you're the private instructor. I had never done private lessons until the last 2 years now. And I was absolutely blown away at the personal connection now that you have with your students, especially if you're stopping to have those conversations. Anxiety is so prevalent in all of these lessons that I'm doing. I have students from, I do some mommy and me classes, all the way to students who are in their 60s. And that anxiety is never with us when we're babies. I have third graders and I'm like, no, you're not really showing it yet. But then the second you get to that developmental stage where everything now, it just feels so much more like this big, vast question. And to be the person that's having those conversations, to be the person that's telling the 60-year-old who's having anxiety that it's totally normal and that, it never really goes away, but here's some tips and tricks on how to combat it, how to get used to singing without the stress. To be that person is so utterly essential and incredible to be that.
it's something that we don't learn either. I mean, we learn it a little bit through our own music, and it's kind of passed from teacher to teacher. As long as you've got a really solid educator yourself and solid support there, then of course it's learned. But we also have to be cognizant as teachers that we also pass on our trauma. That if we had a teacher that it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, that we did have a tumultuous relationship or there was some negativity, that we have to be aware that that does not get passed on to our students and we don't repeat those behaviors or subconsciously. It's just like parenting, right? Like you have to be careful not to pass those things on and be aware of them.
Yep.
But lessons in particular, it is part, music class and lessons, kind of talk about these interchangeably. It is part music education, it is part therapy in a lot of ways for many of our students. And that connection is so cool. And when you've got students that you see constantly through elementary school, middle school, high school, you work with them for years, you create friendships. Like I'm still friends with my elementary school music teacher on Facebook, and she's traveling the world right now and doing music education in other countries, and she's been in Egypt and Japan, and it's all over the place. And I love following along with that because I had a wonderful relationship with her, and I have so much that I'm thankful for when it comes to Mrs. Zupan and her influence in my life. These people matter a lot. Like the music educator matters so much. And not that I don't have great relationships with other educators that I've had along the way, my music teachers consistently are the ones that I'm still the most attached to. They still have the strongest relationships. And part of that's my career, of course. Like I'm sure you experience this too, right? But those people, you are so attached to them as opposed to someone that you spent a year with.
Yes. But even going with that, I know that some of these students who I'm so lucky I was able to email my old principal and say, hey, I'm going to be in the area right now. My fiance and I are traveling, but I'll be back in Connecticut for a little. I was like, hey, can I just come up to Rhode Island and just say a quick hey? And the response I got was so positive. Oh my goodness, we would love to see you. And I know that the students that I'm going to see, not all of them want to be musicians, but we do have that relationship. Yeah. And I'm so excited to see them for that relationship specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? It's such a cool, unique part of what we do. Oh, I love that.
Oh, we're awesome.
Okay, so you've been talking about traveling and everything. So let's talk about business life. So you're running your business now, I think completely online, correct?
Completely virtual.
Awesome. What does a day in the life look like? What are you working on right now? How do things function in your life now that we've transitioned a little bit?
So that's the thing that I'm, again, I feel like I keep saying, oh, I'm lucky, and I really do feel it. My fiance and I had been at my school for 5 years, and throughout that entire time, I loved my school. But my want to travel just didn't stop. And we would try to make it work with our summers and things like that and, getting out on winter break. But I just kept on watching all of these videos of people who travel full time. And I couldn't, this is again one of those things where I wanted to be an educator. I want to be an educator, but I don't want to be an educator who's sacrificing every other part of me, because education is a part of me, but it's a part. And so looking at my fiance who was like, Leanna, I'm a voice actor. I can work from anywhere. Where do you want to go? And I kind of looked at him. I want to go everywhere, And I'm very, very blessed where I'm in a trailer right now. And it's a beautiful trailer. And it's a comfortable trailer. And it hooked up to our Jeep Cherokee with the Hemi, which I don't know if it really should, but it is. I'm very lucky right now where my business is doing well enough where I could gratefully say to my school, thank you for letting me become a teacher here. And I still have so much to learn, but thank you for letting me become a teacher here. I need to go and do this. And having now this ability to work from this home that we have built and to be everywhere. So far in just the last few months, we typically stop and we stay at a place for 2 weeks, but I have been at Dog Canyon, New Mexico. Before that was Oklahoma. Then we went to Phoenix, Arizona. We did Joshua Tree in California, which was incredible. We just were in San Diego, Then we shot up to the Grand Canyon and are now in Sedona, Arizona, which might be my favorite place in the world because this place is just incredible. Have you ever been to Sedona?
I haven't. No.
It's so just the I'm realizing as I was living in Providence for so long, and I knew I wanted to live in Providence. I knew I wanted to teach in an inner city, but then looking around and being like, oh, where are the trees? I grew up in such a teeny tiny town where that was just part of it. You hiked every day and you went to the river and things like that. And I lived in Providence for 5 years and missed that part of my life and found myself always running off to the ocean or running off to do a camping weekend. And now to be able to do this while doing the Soaring Scarves Academy is incredible. And I'm very, very lucky that now I was missing teaching 100%. So even with Soaring Scarves and working with my teachers and things like that, I still kind of went, maybe I can just get a couple students, to kind of take off the, I guess I'll call it a void, that not being able to teach was definitely providing for me. So I was very lucky where, lucky and not lucky. This is also something that you and me talked about, where I found a position doing piano, voice, drums, and just early elementary music. And I just joined this company who I probably shouldn't mention the name just for those, because I'm not going to say anything nice right now, where I realized, I'm the one teaching, but you're the one now taking 50% of what I am teaching for. How does this make sense? So I was very interested with your panel discussion at NAMM, where I was like, why am I sitting here and losing half of this potential income that I could have instead of just doing it on my own, which I'm essentially already doing, kind of thing. So thank you very much, Kelly, for inspiring me, because now that has become part of Soaring Scarves, where yes, I teach my educators, but now I've also branched into teaching my younger students or voice students or piano students, just because it's there, it's available. That's
awesome. Well, and there's so much, as we're talking about like music educators being undervalued. In private education, you can set your own rates and all that good stuff, and we do a lot of things to try to make it affordable and accessible to all of our students, of course. But it is, I think it's important that music educators also realize that they can be making $60, $70, $80, $100 an hour teaching privately and have that flexibility, and that people do value them. They will pay for your time. They will want to work with you, and they will find those opportunities, because what you're bringing and what you've worked your entire life towards does matter.
Yes.
And there are other options too. So not that, we're here to like talk anybody out of working in the school system. Like we need you to be doing that. But also, please do advocate for yourself. We've got the proof that people do value music lessons and they want to incorporate this into their lives, into their children's lives, and there's a ton of value there. So advocating for yourself.
And I feel like it's not even
important.
Yeah, I feel like it's not even like choose between, private education and either way. We need to, as a profession of music educators as a whole, start advocating for the fact that we are worth way more than a lot of times we have stapled to our head of this is what I make. What music educators are being paid in the public in the public school system is abominable. But that's true for every educator right now, because there's not enough people saying, wait a minute, this is wrong.
Yeah,
I'm worth more. And I feel like that becomes such a part where money is like this scary word for educators. And we need to get that out of our head. It's not a scary word. It's a value word. And we need to recognize our own value and demand to be reciprocated for our value. And that comes from anything. Like a lot of times I'll do my professional developments, and some of them were free, but some of them weren't. And my lessons weren't free. And I had some backlash from teachers where they were like, well, why wouldn't you give this away for free? And I said, well, because I took a lot of time to make them.
Yeah.
My time is not free.
This didn't
I am
appear
providing
out
a
of thin air.
service. No,
Yeah.
we need to understand that it's worth something, and that something shouldn't. I hate the notion of, oh, we'll do it for the kids. I do, we do everything for the kids, but why are you using that as a threat that if we're not doing it with the kids in mind, that we're somehow a greedy individual?
Right.
And that's tough for all, but that's what I mean when I have these professional developments about advocacy,
Yeah.
because we need to get that mindset
Right.
that it seems to be ingrained in educators specifically. We need to take that out of our heads, because sacrificing your happiness, your being, your health for a job is at the end of the day a job that should pay you adequately for for the service that you're providing.
Well, and it's frustrating too, because I think music educators, we kind of double dip. Not only do we have this like educator do it for the sake of the kids kind of pressure and mindset, but then also on the music side of things, we have a scarcity mindset of do it for the sake of the music and the love of the art, and we're double dipping on both of those, and it's a huge challenge, and I think it leads to a lot of stress. And I'm sure you talk about this a lot in your professional development and with your teachers that you're working with too, but if you don't have to enter the classroom with the burden of your stress, your home stress, your financial stress, whatever you're worried about, you don't have to take on a second job in order to make ends meet, to keep everything functioning and flowing in your life and keep everything really harmonious, you're a better teacher. You're actually physically and mentally present for your students. You have more to give because you're not trying to pour from an empty cup. So that advocacy, it doesn't just benefit the instructor or the educator. Of course it benefits our students. They get a lot more out of us when we have a lot more to give.
Yes, exactly. And these just need to be the conversations that all teachers coming into this profession know that they're gonna have to have. And
Absolutely.
to be that teacher that we want to be for that student. That's just something that we now have to understand, that if you're ready to become an educator, okay, be ready to be your advocate.
Yeah. Well, and we advocate for our students all the time. All the time. It's a huge part of what we do.
Yeah, we miss ourselves.
Yep.
Why?
Yeah. It's very frustrating. Okay, so we've made some transitions in your life, and things obviously look a lot different today than they have in the last couple of years. Outside of traveling, what are some other things that you enjoy personally? What are some other things that you're working on right now? Like, what is life living in a trailer and traveling the country? This is so cool.
That's definitely an interesting part of it. We absolutely love traveling, but what I love is that it gives me all the time that I need to not only work with my one-on-one students as a way to keep my teaching muscles going, and also as an extra income, obviously, because who doesn't love another multiple stream of income? But then it also gives me my time to work with my educators, who are now all very, very burnt out at the end of the year. I'm like posting on Facebook, like, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you sure? But that's definitely something that this life has been able to afford, is the freedom to create more. And one of the things that I'm creating right now is all the professional development. I was very, very happy to now be able to offer that on my website. In fact, I mentioned to you this a little while ago, but I do have a little bit of some free professional development for anybody who's interested on just starting this journey, which it is a journey. It's not like adding scarves to a classroom can be a magic band-aid for any issues that are going on. It's definitely a journey. And for any teacher who is struggling either with behavioral issues, or maybe you're teaching lessons virtually, but you're just not getting the students' attention as easily, because it is difficult over a laptop. It's difficult over a screen to get the same in-depth experience for your students. So if you're a teacher who is struggling with that and you're listening to this wonderful, wonderful podcast right now, well, then I do have something that is for any teacher who's looking to add some meaningful movement into their classroom, to teach composition, to teach improvisation, to teach the essential elements of music, pitch dynamics, tempo, texture, all those wonderful things. And to do it in a way that you know your students are going to love. And I'm very proud of this curriculum. I'm very proud of my professional development and my scarf dances. I'm proud because I know that they work. I was the teacher who was yelling over my classes just to get them to listen, or, leaving the school and being so burnt out because I knew I had to make 3 more lessons for the next day. And knowing that that was my evening gone. I was the teacher who was having students confusing the elements and being like, well, that's a high pitch because it's quiet. Oh, darn it. And they're abstract for a reason.
Yeah.
To give now those meaningful musical experiences. I was talking to Shauna Longo, that educator I told you about, who brought in technology into such a young class. What she described it as was creating multiple portals for all students to be able to understand a concept. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's it. It's about creating multiple entry points where any student can come in, and maybe it's through, the stories that they're going to relate. Maybe it's through the cultural aspect. Maybe it's through the movement break that we do, and giving those opportunities. And I feel like that's for teachers in the classroom. I feel like that's for teachers who are starting these private lessons right now with all my younger students and with my middle schoolers and high schoolers that I'm teaching right now virtually. I know that my lessons wouldn't be nearly as effective if I wasn't saying, all right, stand up because we're going to build a rhythm tree. And instead of just having them memorize, oh, that's a whole note. Well, now instead they're doing a whole note slide, which gives them those 4 beats. Things like that, where you're taking something that, again, they'll memorize it 100%, but they'll memorize it in a beat, because when I show them a picture and say, what is this? They'll go, the whole note slide, but it will be in their head and they'll know how many beats it gets. So things like that. I do have professional development that I just put up. It is free for the day 1. If you are interested in 2 and 3, then there would be a fee, or you would join the Soaring Scarves for a free month of our curriculum, which includes all of our lessons, which I'm very proud of, all of our movement breaks, our scarf dances, and the rest of our archived professional development. So if that is something that your educators listening in are interested in, I do have a link for that. It is totally free. They would just need to sign up for an account. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of fun things coming your way. It sounds like everything from, obviously that you're doing the Soaring Scarves and all the adventures that you guys are on personally right now. And there's a lot of really fun things coming. And it sounds like we've got more professional development. I know you and I are going to collaborate on something this summer, which I'm so excited for. It's going to be a ton of fun. But I know you've got a lot of really fun projects coming. So obviously, for anyone who's listening, all of Leanna's links, as always, will be in the show notes for this one too. So you guys can go back and grab any of those if you're interested and see what she's got in the works too. Thank you for sharing, Leanna. This has been so much fun. Like I said, I was looking forward to this one so much. It was nice to meet you at NAMM. I'm excited about all the things that we're working on together. I know we've got quite a few projects in the works right now. Yes. So I appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing your story and your journey. Maybe as a quick final thought, if we have anyone that's listening that is maybe toying with the idea of starting an online business, or is trying to figure out like a next step in their career that's maybe just outside the classroom, what would be your one big piece of advice for someone that's looking at your journey and thinking, oh gosh, I might want to do something along those lines?
Mm-hmm. I would say, and I still have so much more to learn, which I'm excited, Kelly, to look at your program to be able to really learn that, because I'd say just don't make the mistake of thinking that if somebody else does it for you, that it's going to be easier at the end, because it's not. Going through different programs like OutSchool and Super Vox and things where you're so nervous to put yourself out there to gain the audience and to gain the clients, don't be scared to don't be so scared that you end up wasting more of your valuable time by starting something that you'll see the pay that should be going to you going to someone else, or the exposure that if you just take the steps and look into that, you're so nervous that somebody else has to do it. Don't look for somebody else to do it, because it's so completely possible for you to do it yourself. And again, I definitely have my own journey that I'm going to need to be going on, but I'm very excited to do that and just to have it be something else to add to an income that all music educators need to diversify. And this is the way to do that and still do the thing that we absolutely love, which is at the end of the day to teach.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I agree. You just got to jump in, like be authentic to yourself. Just give it a try. You never know what's going to happen. You might end up with an accidental business. I mean, Leanna and I are kind of, I guess, the accidental examples of that one, right? You never know what will happen. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for sharing so much great information about your teaching journey and what this has looked like for you. I think this will be really helpful for everyone. And I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Kelly. This has been really great. And like you said, I can't wait to have so many more collaborations in the future.
Absolutely. We got a lot of good stuff coming. Thanks, Leanna.